All right, people of the internet, it's Friday, which means it's time for another roundtable extravaganza. Joining me today are former CIA officer and host of the President's Daily Briefing, Mike Baker, as well as host of Impact Theory, Tom Bilyeu. Gentlemen, welcome back to the Rubin Report.
Thanks very much, man.
Thanks for having us.
I was asking you guys where you are right before. Tom, I know you're home in Los Angeles. Mike, you are elsewhere in a hotel, clearly. We are in very different parts of the country right now, but you think we can make some sense of this crazy week? What do you think?
Nah.
Probably.
Nah, what happened?
Probably not.
Absolutely.
Probably
Let's
not.
do it.
All right, let's see what we can do here. We're going to just dive into a couple of the stories that we didn't get to this week. Some of the big names making some news, including Joe Rogan, Mark Zuckerberg, this Eric Adams fiasco, and then a little bit about the fact that they keep trying to kill Donald Trump. So let's dive right in. Chamath, you guys know Chamath from the All In podcast. He was on Rogan's podcast this week, and he's not a traditional Republican, and everyone watching this knows I'm always interested in people that are not particularly political, that something wakes them up and they start coming around. So Chamath and Rogan started talking about Trump and what's going on here with the constant media lies. Let's take a look.
It's also the media's depiction of him, which has been grossly distorted.
And I think that, you know, I met him and spent time with him. I've also had lunch with Kamala. She was very kind, very nice person. Donald Trump, very funny, very kind, very polite. Like, he talks to you. And I just was like, wow, this is like totally, and exactly what you said. I was like, I was expecting something totally different. And I think, though, that the part at the core, part of where the media goes crazy, I think, I'm guessing, is that there's a part of him as well that's like an entertainer. I mean, he's he's as good as any comedian.
Yeah,
he's on point. He's got he's got rhythm. He knows how to land. So there's a thing that he's doing when he's on stage, which for the audience, I think, is no different than going to a show or a revival or something. You're seeing a star.
Right.
But then if you're looking at him as Donald Trump the person, I think the media really gets they get tilted.
Well, not only that, they've distorted who he is. Whatever flaws Donald Trump has are nothing in comparison to the media's depictions of him.
You know, one example that bothered me was the Charlottesville press conference. When I first heard the media depiction of it, I was really upset because of what I thought he said.
Right.
It turned out he didn't say it.
Exactly.
In fact, not only did he not say it, he said the exact opposite.
Right.
And then I was really frustrated and a little bit angry because I thought he was never lying to me. The filter was lying to me.
Right.
All right, so the reason I wanted to show that clip, I know that's not new information to you guys, that Donald Trump actually is a pretty nice person, and I've had similar interactions with him privately, but more so because even the very fine people thing, that these things are so profoundly not true, and yet there's still people waking up to it, which I always find interesting. And it should be noted that Chamath voted for Hillary and voted for Biden. Mike, I'm guessing it doesn't surprise you, but probably makes you pretty happy when some of these people start waking up out of the fog?
Well, it does. Look, I do take exception with one thing Chamath said, which is I've seen Trump dance. I don't know that he's got rhythm. So I'm going to back that one up a little bit. But, you know, I can see it was in my mind when I heard that the first time around when they released that podcast, I could see people either just exploding in their heads or switching off as soon as he said, right after he said, yeah, I had lunch with Kamala and she's a nice, kind person. I also, have met with Trump and he's a polite, kind, funny person. I could see people just saying that's it, because the problem is you don't really get any critical thinking. We like to imagine that most people, when faced with conflicting ideas, will take the time to think about it, right? Maybe assess their particular point of view. That's bullshit. That doesn't happen, right? People have dug themselves into their holes and they're in a silo. So when they hear something like that, right, that's the exception. Chamath is definitely an outlier among, whatever you want to call it, independents, libertarians, moderate Democrats. most are just not going to change their position, particularly with Trump. You could argue the same with general policy issues and other candidates. Look, if Trump wasn't running, I don't think we should kid ourselves. If Trump wasn't running, whoever was the Republican nominee would be taking a massive incoming fire.
Right.
It might not stir the base quite the same way that it does with Trump, but they wouldn't care, right? They've got a game plan, and that game plan is destroy the opponent in whatever way, whatever narrative you need.
Yeah, I think it's worth reiterating that because you're right. Had it been DeSantis, for example, they would be doing all of the evil things to him. I always said they would just call him Hitler with a calculator. Like that would be the more scary version somehow. Tom, I have a feeling you love that clip because you love sort of the watching people in a very careful way, sort of saying what they believe. And you can see him kind of coming around on something in real time.
What I like about Chamath is he's very much a systems thinker. So he's not somebody that I've ever seen. I've watched a lot of his All In podcasts. He's not somebody that I see spill into dogma. And if you're an operator, if you run businesses, you are constantly being smashed in the mouth with the reality that a lot of times something you think is going to work does not actually work. And if you're going to thrive in the marketplace long enough, you begin to really go, okay, what evidence do I have to see that a policy is working or not working? And so Chamath's whole idea, I've seen that whole interview, Chamath's whole idea about you have to separate with Trump the message from the messenger. And I think that is really shrewd. And for him to get down to who do I think, whose policies are going to have the most positive second and third order consequences, that's what I think you see him thinking through. Mm-hmm. It isn't for him about the personality, which is why I think he starts the whole, I'm going to call it a rant, but he starts that whole thing with, look, I've been out with Kamala and she's lovely, and I've been out with Trump and he's lovely and he's funny. And so the sort of set the personality aside, there's a bigger thing to look at, and it's these second and third order consequences. That I think, if I were going to reach out to my beloved independent voters, it would be to get them to do that. What are going to be the knock-on effects of these policies? And the only way to know that's to look back at history. But that's probably a whole other rant.
And it's not that easy for people to be like, oh, the wool was pulled over my eyes with the very funny people. Mike, go ahead.
I was going to say, I love the fact that you used the word rant with Chamath, and then, you corrected it, but like that's the soft, if that's a rant, my God, right? That's a Xanax rant right there. That's the softest, most thoughtful rant I've ever heard in my life. But I agree with you. Look, I love the fact that in that he's looking at the policies. I guess I've turned into such a cynical son of a bitch when it comes to, the dysfunction of American politics that, I just don't believe that the vast majority of people are voting based on politics, right? This is an emotive experience based on personality, and I don't know how we walk that dog back.
Yeah, well, you might be right, but there is something interesting happening right now with this new alliance of people, and I want to throw back to another clip from Rogan's show with Chamath, talking about how suddenly Trump, Tulsi, RFK are all on the same side, and that might actually be a wider signal.
One of the things that people are so excited about with this Trump union with Tulsi Gabbard and Robert Kennedy is that you're having these movements that seem to be almost impossible to achieve outside of an outsider, like the Make America Healthy Again concept. Like, what are you talking about? You're going to go up against these companies that have been donating to these political parties forever and have allowed them to have these regulations that are allowing them to have these dyes in food that's illegal in our neighboring Canada? Like, what? No one's done that before, right? So that's very exciting.
Okay, so
Tom, you're not a partisan guy. I suspect this new alliance makes you very happy.
Dude, it does. So in the whole run-up, I was getting poked fun at for being an RFK stan. And the reason is that going back to this idea of there are second and third order consequences to the things that you do, and RFK, love him or hate him, think he's unhinged, whatever you think, like he's really been on the forefront of a lot of very real issues that certainly to me as somebody who's obsessed with health is very cognizant that there's something that's going very wrong. Mm-hmm. And so seeing these guys find each other is really, really exciting, especially when you throw into the mix, it's not just RFK, you've got Elon Musk coming into the mix, you've got people like Chamath that are suddenly putting, maybe soft support, but putting a little bit of energy behind at least talking about Trump in a positive way and making that an acceptable thing to do.
Oh, I think it's more than that.
A lot of people from very disparate areas say the same thing is super.
Yeah, if I'm not mistaken, he co-hosted the fundraiser with David Sachs for Trump. So it's a little more than soft, actually, with him. Mike, before I let you jump in, I want to read this tweet that I thought was interesting on the heels of that right there. This is from Ashley St. Clair. She wrote, "I wish Joe Rogan and all influential figures who allegedly decry censorship would just endorse Trump and relentlessly direct their audience to vote and volunteer their time door knocking for voters. Without this, they are creating the Bolshevik country they warn about, mobilize or shut up at this point." And Elon Musk responded to that and said, "True." That sort of gets to your point, I think, Mike, about like everyone's just got to freaking make a decision at this point.
Yeah, I think I understand why some folks who have a very large platform, spend their time talking about the ideas, about the individuals, the policies, and don't necessarily throw their hat in the ring one way or the other. But at some point, look, I don't need to like who I vote for, frankly. Mm-hmm. I need to be supportive of the policies. I need to vote for ideas and policies that I believe are going to, push this country in what I consider to be an appropriate direction. I'm not taking, any of the nominees out to homecoming. So I guess from my perspective, do I give a shit that, Trump is not occasionally eloquent or says things, or I don't care that he's perceived as mean on occasion. It doesn't matter to me. Likewise, I don't care about really Kamala. I care about what their ideas and policies are. So for me, I look at what Trump is doing, and I think, I don't give a shit. I like Republican policies on a centrist basis. I'm more of a middle guy. I don't think any party is fiscally responsible anymore. So that's kind of out the door. The idea that the Republicans would be
right.
more wise with our finances. I don't think that necessarily happens at this point. But I do want to push national security issues, border security concerns, foreign policy directions that I think make sense. And so that's how I put down my cards.
Tom, what do you think about what Ashley said there? Because I tend to agree that if you do kind of what we do or what Rogan does as a living, it's one thing to just talk about the ideas and all that, but kind of getting to the end of the road, I think, is really valuable. Otherwise, it's almost a little insulting to the audience. That would be my position.
So I think I am the person you guys are speaking to and against. So my thing is I want people to be very thoughtful. I am actually trying to go into this with an incredibly open mind and looking at who is actually going to move the country forward. Like that's going to be how I settle in all of this. Now, Mike, going back to what you said, I think you're absolutely right. At some point, myself as well, I'm going to have to decide like which way are we going to go. And to be honest, in preparing for this interview, I thought a lot about that and started watching a lot of policy because looking at the policy far more than the personality. But you made a really good point at the beginning, which is that for most people, this is just an emotive decision. And so it really does matter the candidates you put on the field. And I am to my core mortified by the candidates that have been put on the field on both sides because they neither of them, I think, get the job done of really galvanizing and inspiring. And at the risk of wearing where I would love to see things go on my sleeve, I will say when I watched Vivek, even now, like if you guys saw the Lex Friedman interview, like that guy is just knocking it out of the ballpark. And he carries himself in the way that I want to see a candidate carry himself. He speaks from a place of policy. Now you can disagree with his policy, but this guy is thoughtful. So, may that be the future of where some of this goes. But to the point very specifically about the text, it comes down to what you see is your lane in the world. So I am trying to get people to understand a very small set of things. and most appropriate to this conversation is that you can think up from first principles. So as I do that myself, I will certainly lay my cards bare as to where I think that goes. And certainly if we end up covering that here, I will give you the first principles with which I am thinking through this problem. And if the vote were today, I can tell you exactly how I would cast it. But that's what I want people to do. I'm not a guy that's going to come bang the table and say, this is what I believe and you should all believe it too. Other than, hey, I believe everyone should think from first principles, and I think you should do it too. So that's the only thing I'm going to bang the table on.
I think that was your way of saying you're voting for Trump unless something crazy happens.
Yeah, I mean, if you look, you can ask the question pointedly and we can get into it. I would want to build up for people the value system that leads me to my conclusion, because I want people to evaluate my thinking from a values perspective. I don't want the hot button, he's either going for Harris or Trump, and that's where this devolves into madness. Now, if somebody wants to attack my value system, that's interesting. Now we can have a debate of, hey, I'm just saying these are the things that I believe, and then I'm trying to match a candidate to the things that I believe, and I believe the things I believe because I think they yield the greatest outcome, and I can tell you what the outcome is that I want, which is human flourishing. So it's like, hey, I can define this process all the way down, which is why you can then build up from first principles to say, Tom, either your value system is nonsensical to leading people to human flourishing, or I get the value system, but the candidate that you've mapped to that value system is illogical. Awesome. Now we can actually have a debate, and it's not just name calling.
I think you might be, I'm not sure if you're living, I mean, I get what you're saying, and I do agree. I just don't think that's the world we live in, right? I think the world we live in is that people don't, for the most part, right? There's folks that do, but for the most part, people don't sit and ponder what other people's values are and whether that belief system makes sense, and maybe they need to think about tweaking their own and doing all those things. I think I like to spend a lot of time reading contrary opinions and thoughts, and so I spend a lot of time looking at just about every side I can find, particularly on news, right? Because I'm always fascinated by how you can have an event. Here's whatever that event is. Here's the event. And it's nothing really has changed over thousands of years. It's still the same thing. Two people come at it and you've got two different versions of that event, right? 10 people come at it, you got 10 different versions of that event. But what we've got now is we've got a World War I situation where you've got, it seems, from, because we live in a two-party system, you got people sitting in their trenches. There's a minimum number of folks living in the middle or existing anywhere in the center, and everybody's just throwing hand grenades at each other. So I don't know that having those discussions where you're trying to lay bare your belief system really makes much of an impact, because I think the vast majority of people are going, well, that's bullshit. You got to vote for Harris, or that's bullshit. You got to vote for Trump, and you're a douchebag if you don't. So again, maybe I'm just way too cynical. I sound like one of those two old guys who sits up on the balcony on the Muppet Show, just screaming and yelling insults and things. But yeah.
Well, I would say largely, the middle clearly has shifted more to the right, let's say, because that's the point of, say, a moderate Dem like Tulsi or Elon or Rogan, depending on what he's going to do, like a whole bunch of people, RFK, that would not have been Republicans, seemingly going that way. We'll talk about a guy that has a little bit of influence over which way people vote, Mark Zuckerberg, in a second. But let me tell you about Ramp real quick. Guys, running a business is tricky, and you have to stay on top of every little detail across expenses, payments, and accounting. Who you use can make or break you, and you need the best. Ramp is a complete game changer and saves you time from getting trapped in busy work while maximizing productivity and cutting wasteful spending. Ramp is a corporate card and spend management software designed to help you save time and money, and put money back in your pocket, I should say. In fact, businesses that use Ramp save an average of 5% in the first year using them. With Ramp, you're able to issue cards to every employee with limits and restrictions and automate expense reporting so you can stop wasting time at the end of every month. They're also easy to use, issue virtual and physical cards, and start making payments in less than 15 minutes. Whether you have 5 employees or 5,000, Ramp will save you time and money. Get $250 when you join Ramp today. Just go to ramp.com. That's ramp.com/Rubin. That's ramp.com/Rubin. Card issued by Sutton and Celtic Bank, members FDIC. Terms and conditions apply. And now back to me. All right, so a guy that might have a little influence over this election, and definitely has had some influence over previous elections, is Mark Zuckerberg. and it sounds like he's becoming a libertarian. Check this out from the leading report. Mark Zuckerberg is reportedly now aligned with libertarian ideology and has hired a Republican strategist to repair his relationship with right-wing media operatives after years of censorship. Mike, because you said you're the cynic here, or at least at the moment are the cynic, I'm a little cynical about this. The guy who put Zuckerbucks in and has been helping Democrats for years, now he's going through his libertarian phase. What's going on here?
Yeah, that's a hell of a pivot, right? It's like you're saying the Exxon Valdez can turn on a dime. So I agree with you. I'm cynical. I was cynical when I started reading about this, and hey, God bless. And I think it's wonderful because, that is theoretically human capacity to be able to change your mind based on, changing circumstances. So maybe it is true, right? But I think we need to see a little bit more in terms of action and put a little time there before we start to imagine somehow that he's crossed over the bridge.
Tom, I always thought there was something strange about all these kind of tech silicon billionaire types, being these woke leftists, when in essence, people that want to build businesses generally are more libertarian in nature. They want lower taxes, they want less regulation, they want as much freedom to do things. So maybe he just got caught up in that and is coming around. I'm trying to give him some credit here, maybe.
It's tough. I think some of this has to do with their age and where they came up at a time where it really was culturally all about reaching out, connecting, bringing people together. If you can take him seriously, he saw a business opportunity and connecting the world. Even just saying that out loud enough to rally your team, it's going to start to seep into your own psyche. And so I'll give him the benefit of the doubt that he is a very aggressive business guy, obviously, who's going to walk a fine line, but that he really does want to try to connect people and do something that helps and is big business. Now, what I find interesting is that in his retelling, a lot of this is about not liking the pressure that's being put on the government, that he realizes both groups of people are, both the left and the right, are anti-technology. And so he just feels a little bit spurned, like I have done something that my constituents, the people that use my products, are furious about in terms of me suppressing free speech. It also doesn't align with who I am as a person. And so now I'm going to back out of this. I don't think you have to believe him any more altruistic, but just in terms of a read on the situation and showing the kind of manipulation that's been going on and him taking a stance and saying, I'm not going to be doing this anymore. I don't think he's yet in Musk's league of taking bullets for that stance. But to Mike's point, let's wait.
Right. We have to be somewhat leery. I mean, this is a guy that absolutely was working with the government during last election. He admitted it as it relates to Hunter laptop and COVID and a bunch more. The left-wing media is not happy with Mr. Zuckerberg right now. Check this out from Mother Jones. I mean, these are really far left wackadoodles. They are not pleased with me usually. On Tuesday, the New York Times reported that one of the world's richest men had recently experienced a major epiphany after bankrolling a political organization that supported immigration reform, espousing his support for social justice, and donating hundreds of millions of dollars to support local election workers during the 2020 election. Mark Zuckerberg is done with politics. The Facebook founder and part-time Hawaiian feudal lord, according to the piece, believed that both parties loathed technology and that trying to continue engaging with political causes would only draw further scrutiny to the company, and felt burned by the criticism he has faced in recent years on everything from the proliferation of disinformation on Facebook to his investment in election administration, which conservatives dismissively refer to as Zuckerbucks. He is mad, in other words, that people are mad at him, and it has made him rethink his entire theory of how the world works. Like a lot of unfathomably wealthy people who have the resources to harvest their own beef, Zuckerberg now reportedly considers himself a libertarian. Mike, the reason I wanted to read something from a lefty rag, and Mother Jones is largely trash, I probably don't have to explain that to many people watching this, is that they're okay with his meddling when it goes their way. Then if he says, I'm going to meddle a little bit less, he's not saying I'm going to invest in right-wing think tanks or I'm going to be, funding Reason magazine, which is a libertarian magazine. He's just saying I'm going to have a less of a hand on this thing, and they ain't happy about that.
No, not at all. And they also bizarrely act as if It's an insult to be called a part-time feudal lord. Son of a bitch, I would love that.
That sounds pretty good to me, yeah.
Put that on my tombstone. Yeah, it's always the way it is, right? Hey, we love you as long as you're, feeding the beast and, throwing red meat to the acceptable crowd. As soon as you turn, then, clearly we don't like you, we hate you. And it's this pendulum problem with politics, right? It's always just like one side to the other. You get exhausted with this because, Mother Jones could have, God bless them, they wouldn't, but they could have done an intelligent think piece about this. What does this mean? What could drive a man, like this, who's been so influential, so wealthy, so involved in one side of politics? What could drive a person to do that? They could have had that article, right? They're not stupid people, but they're just incredibly biased and they can't get out of that. So it's not surprising in any way. It's just, frustrating and a little bit sad in the sense of where we are in American politics. I keep going back to the same thing. I know it sounds like I'm kicking a dead horse, but I keep going back to the same thing. How do you reverse this? How do you walk the dog back? Nobody's going to dial down the temperature on our civil discourse, but we have to, right? Because we've got hostile nations out there who are spending a great deal of time and resource, right, to do exactly what we're doing. And we're taking the bait every day, right, with their disinformation and their misinformation and their efforts to create divide, right? And they're delighted at the results that they're getting. And whether it's the Russians, the Chinese, the Iranians in particular, we're just making the job so easy for them.
Tom, let's see if we can answer that question, because I have a theory on how we could ramp it down. But do you have a theory on how we could ramp it all down?
Yeah, so I think there are two options. One is good and one is horrifying and far more likely. So option one is you get somebody that is actually a strong leader that can lead from the middle, create a vision for what the future looks like that people legitimately get excited about. And with any luck, it's time to the point where the youth feel that by following that person, it is an act of rebellion. So the easy characterization to make here is JFK. He was obviously assassinated for his troubles, but he was certainly on the right path in terms of a moderate message that was able to bring people together. I thought that RFK Jr. was actually on that path, that he had a message that was inspiring. He refused to get into the partisanry of it all. He was very focused on policy, very focused on the things you see in your own children. I thought that was a really good play, and I think it continues to be smart with Make America Healthy Again. But he just wasn't able to galvanize people. So if you have a really strong leader that has that kind of message that a lot of people gravitate towards, now you've really got something. But the hard things that will have to be done are so hard. Namely, just you can't keep deficit spending. So just to really make everything terrifying, you're going to have to cut entitlements. So good luck, but it would work if you could pull that off. Now, the second way, and this is far more likely, but oh God, it is so heinous, I hope we avoid it at all costs. And that is you blow things up. So if you look at every time you get the kind of debt that we have now, you end up leading to a debt jubilee. You have to, because the debts are just so astronomical. There's no way out from under them. Now, my base assumption is that the debt is actually the largest thing that's driving a lot of the malaise that people feel right now. All right, if I'm right about that, you need a debt jubilee. The debt jubilee, despite the cool name, requires bloodshed to get done. So, but if you do that, it will be that slap to the face of all of us that is so hard and so disorienting that we snap out of this fever dream. And then, then hopefully via social media, which is a vehicle by which so much of this gets propagated and all that people will just be so devastated by the outcome of this tribal velocity away from each other that there'll just be a social energy to bring people back to the middle.
I'll give you one other version of that, which is a Trump landslide win might be able to do it, because it would bring in the RFK that you just talked about, and it would bring in the Tulsi and the Elon and so many of these people. And if it was really just a smash to the kneecaps of the woke, I think most of America would be like, all right, now we can debate abortion a little bit more in a more healthy manner. Now we can debate taxes, foreign policy, et cetera. I think that may be our only short-term chance.
That would require one more thing, So Trump would have to find a path to leading in a reconciliatory way.
Oh, I think he
would
can
have
do
to
it.
be bringing people together. He would have to tout this stuff like, hey, because he's going to say, I've done it. We know about that. But if it's, I've done all of this to bring us back together, to heal us. Now, if he can use that rhetoric, even if he's using it in a kayfabe way, I don't care. To Mike's point, people make emotional decisions. If he can make people feel that, like, whoa, this is a time to reach across the aisle, to hold hands, to really come together, as cheesy as that sounds, it really could work. But he would have to use the language that will bring people together.
I actually think it's possible.
That would change his stripes. And I think that may be too heavy a lift, right? I love the idea, right? And I do think it's a scenario where you could get that shift if there is a landslide. The other scenario is what we got, in the previous Trump administration, 4 years of the Democrats just digging their heels in and creating chaos through investigations and charges and just doing that. And they couldn't help themselves. So I'm not sure that would be the case. Look, he had an opportunity to change his stripes after that Butler, Pennsylvania, that first assassination attempt back in mid-July. If he had completely grabbed the high ground, right? The White House made it was just mouthing the words. They said, well, we have to dial down the temperature. We have to be more civil. They didn't mean it. 48 hours later, they were right back to saying Trump is a threat to democracy. He must be stopped. Tim Walz has said, people are going to get killed.
Yep.
It's extreme. They can't help themselves. But if Trump, after that, right, had taken that opportunity to really do a left turn and say, okay, here it is. I've had an epiphany, or whatever you want to say, and just talk about it. And then he maintains that high ground, right? Remember Michelle Obama talking about, they go low, we go high. Yeah, bullshit. They go lower. So, I think there was a massive opportunity there after that first assassination attempt to just seize that and run with it. And I think that could have been very influential for some of the folks that are still undecided, sitting on the fence, trying to decide where are they going with their vote in November.
God, think how crazy it is that the way you even just said after that first assassination attempt, because we're we're just so over these things that there's been a second assassination attempt since then, and it's just yesterday's news. Let's jump over to one other guy who, if you think maybe Mark Zuckerberg potentially is evolving the right way, there's another guy, Mark Cuban, another Mark, who seems to be evolving the wrong way or devolving the wrong way. This is just a compilation of his last 24 hours.
Right of that, meaning the mainstream media is not who you think it is. The mainstream media truly leans right. Maybe. When you're second in command, you do what your boss tells you to do. He delegates authority to you.
But the border was supposed to be her.
Yeah, but it's still the same thing. It's his policies. What he said to her was, you go down and you use diplomacy to try to improve, to try to reduce the flow, the migration of people across the border, right? And when they finally came around, and it took too long, I agree, but when they finally got there, now look at the results. It didn't take a wall, but yet the crossing numbers are where Trump's were when pre-pandemic, at the same number. So it worked. So what she did actually worked.
We can look at exactly what happened. He's already been president. And we can look at what happened when she was vice president. And it's not good, the comparison.
Being the president, Joe, as you know, is different than being vice president. It's not close, right?
So she can take credit for the good things that happened with Biden, but she didn't have anything to do with the bad things.
Trump,
in the past, there have been Democrats that have voted not to certify.
Yeah, that's fine.
Many
right?
times.
That's fine. But
none
of them called their vice president a pussy and said, don't certify the election. Donald Trump, being the socialist that he is, had to beat Bernie. So Donald Trump went out and recommended that interest rate caps be set to 10%. The fact that he's even suggesting price controls and price caps is socialism 101.
So the reason I wanted to show that compilation was, everyone's talking about this thing happening with these moderates sort of breaking towards Trump. We've already said it, the Tulsi RFK, Elon types. And yet here you have someone seemingly breaking the other way. Tom, let me start with you on this one. The line that really got me there, the mainstream media leans right. That seems completely insane.
Well, so I will say that this is actually a sign of intellect. So people are clowning on Mark for not being bright, and he is very smart. When you can step into the shoes of your opponent and actually wear their worldview, it's very impressive. So for him to be able to step into that and get himself to see that it is certainly a sign of somebody who can create an internal worldview. Now, it seems so detached from reality that I can't tell if he's kayfabing because he wants a balanced point of attack to get out there and give people talking points that they can use to defeat Trump, who he clearly does not want to get elected. And hey, fair enough, it will be very effective. Or if he actually believes it. That's where I get lost, which is why, and I know, Mike, I actually agree with you, Mike, that most people are not going to build up from their base assumptions and value system. But the most influential people, or many of them, can and will. And so I would love personally to sit down with Mark and just build up. What are the base assumptions that lead you to a takeaway such as the media, the mainstream media is right-leaning? It seems so detached. So I would need to see how he's piecing that together. And either the kayfabe will be revealed or he'll lay something out that, nobody else sees, but maybe he's got something.
Tom, I think you're the only other person, maybe also Eric Weinstein, talking about kayfabe these days, but it's basically the WWE-style theater that we're all participating in all the time. And the question is Mark just sort of using a script there to kind of troll all of us? Mike, I mean, the media thing, like, what? Yeah,
I think he's definitely smart. There's no argument there. It's not like he's saying things because he's unintelligent, but I do think it's a powerful drug, right? When you start getting massive approval from an element of society, and clearly he's getting he's getting a lot of hugs right now. And I think, even though he's very smart and he's done very well and he's successful, I think that's still intoxicating, right? And he's basically getting his ass pinched every day by the Democrat, campaign team, and they're just loving it. So it's not a surprise, again, that he would be going, all in on this. I think the people, to Tom's point, I think it's interesting. You do talk about like the influential people that are able to change perhaps their opinion, their value system. I think they're basically reading the tea leaves, right? I think a lot of times when you see people start to switch, and I think they're just looking for the winner, as opposed to saying, you know what, my value system is shifted, and now I'm going to go in that direction. I think they're basically a little. God damn, I sound cynical, but I just think it's more of that oftentimes than my beliefs are evolving. I think it's just, I'm seeing where the wind's blowing. I don't need a weatherman to do that. And thank you, Bob Dylan.
Yeah, personally, I agree. When it comes to Cuban, I agree with that, because it's like, I just don't know how you could say things that are so over the top otherwise. It just doesn't really make sense. We're going to talk about this crazy situation coming out of New York City with Eric Adams in just a second. But let me throw to an ad from BHMD1.com. We've been told our whole lives that wrinkle creams were the easiest way to look younger. Now, one doctor says that's nothing but old news. According to Dr. John Lake, the world-renowned Beverly Hills beauty expert, most wrinkle fixes on the market are nothing but glorified moisturizers. They hardly make a dent on your appearance, and some can even be harmful to your skin, he said. Recently, Dr. Lake has focused his attention away from mainstream cosmetic practices. Why? So he can pursue a revolutionary anti-aging breakthrough, one that some experts say could empty the wallets of the cosmetic industry. His personal clients have dubbed his new do-it-yourself technique the age rewinder method, because it can take years or even decades off your appearance in under 2 minutes. In light of this amazing breakthrough, Dr. Lake has released a step-by-step video to the public, free and uninterrupted, where he outlines exactly how to use this simple solution from home. The video has gone viral. At first, it was shared by users on Facebook, but since then, it's racked up over 2.3 million views and counting. So far, the comments and feedback have been outstanding, with thousands of women reporting they look decades younger. You can find out more about this for yourself. Go to bhmd1.com/Rubin or click the link in the description box below. Again, that's bhmd1.com/Rubin. Again, watch the video at bhmd1.com/Rubin right now or click the link in the description box below. All right, so the story out of New York is that the indictment against New York City Mayor Eric Adams has been unsealed. We've got some info here from the Daily Wire. New York City Democrat Mayor Eric Adams was indicted on multiple federal corruption charges in an indictment that was unsealed on Thursday. Adams, whose residence was raided on Thursday morning, was indicted on one count of a conspiracy to commit wire fraud, federal program bribery, and to receive campaign contributions by foreign nationals, one count of wire fraud, one count of bribery, and two counts of solicitation of a contribution by a foreign national. The indictment says that Adams began soliciting and accepting improper benefits as a public official dating back to 2014, including luxury international travel from wealthy foreign business people and at least one Turkish government official seeking to gain influence over him. There's all sorts of conflicting reports on this, and it sounds like it might have been things as simple as just getting hotel upgrades, which of course everyone has gotten a hotel upgrade in their day, or an airline upgrade or that sort of thing. A lot of people are saying, oh, this is because he finally started speaking out against the sanctuary city in New York City, which he kind of pushed in himself. So the progressives are trying to smack him down. Mike, can you just talk a little bit about the workings of, CIA, FBI, DOJ, when these things come out, and then how the media just runs with them regardless of what the facts are?
Yeah, well, that's exactly right. We all love an immediate answer, and so the problem is nowadays we don't get that time that you used to get in the old days before the internets to do the investigation, right? To let the facts develop, and then you discuss the facts. Right now, we just jump to. We saw it after the 13 July Butler, Pennsylvania assassination attempt. Immediately. People were throwing out ideas and theories and saying, okay, look, there's got to be an investigation here. So what you're looking at in New York City is a fairly long-term and very wide. It's not just Eric Adams. There's a number of people within that city administration that have been under investigation. And I get when people say, well, a lot of these things, do they matter? Do they seem to matter? Well, yes, they should matter. Right, that's the point. Do they right now? Well, no. You just look at the behavior of some of the folks on Capitol Hill. But we should set the bar higher. We should expect more from people that we're putting in office to make decisions on the people's behalf. Right? I'm not saying that's going to happen anytime soon.
Right.
But this investigation has been going on for some time, and I think people need to step back, and before they start throwing judgments around and making their own decisions, just let the indictment's been unsealed, but let the facts come out and then make your decisions. But, the immediate, knee-jerk reaction that we always get on one side or the other, again, I guess that's where we are in today's world, but it's disappointing.
When I was reading through it this morning, it's like, man, if they're going to get him on some of this stuff, and again, I don't know exactly what he's done, and we'll find out more, but it's like every single person in government has gotten upgrades and free dinners and all sorts of things, and we can say that that's not good or whatever, but it could end up taking out everybody, which actually maybe would be good. Tom, what do you think?
Yeah, one, I agree with Mike. You got to let the facts develop here. I think part of the strategy right now is to make claims, to bring charges forward, knowing that the headline is going to stick. No matter what ends up happening here, you've got that taint on you. Now, he may have done all of this and more, and maybe it's terrible. And as the facts come out, we'll all be like, yep, that was horrible, and he should go. But the increasing amount that we see lawfare becoming a tool, that is very unsettling. And I don't think there's any way around that other than to culturally say, look, we obviously need to stop people from doing things that are illegal, but we also don't want to use lawfare as a tactic to keep people off the ballot, which is what we're seeing potentially. That's certainly my read on it with Trump. Not that he hasn't done things, but that's not why they're pursuing him. That instead they're pursuing him because it is very useful politically. And so that just feels bad. That feels undemocratic. So this one is tough for me because you can't let people just do whatever they want and get away with it. People have to be held accountable to the rule of law. But I also don't want to see the rule of law used as a weapon.
I should note that my guys are telling me, Mike, your laptop could die at any moment. So if you disappear, it is not because the CIA or DOJ got us. It is a pure battery issue. Right. But let's take a look at some video of the guy. His name is Jumaane Williams, who could potentially replace Eric Adams as mayor.
We are going to have to accept some discomfort in the next few days. That's what we're going to have to do as a city to get through this. And so I'm asking the mayor and the police commissioner to allow people to express their anger, to allow people to express their pain. And as a city, we have to accept that we are going to be in some discomfort for the next few days. And the only thing we should be asking is, how do we address the pain and how do we address the anger? And as long as the leaders are from the community making the decisions, we should all be supportive.
All right, so he's the public advocate in New York City. That was obviously during COVID, but he is a huge BLM activist. He was out there. He's talking about we have to let them express anger and everything else. There's plenty of anger being shown in New York City right now. Hamas and Hezbollah supporters yesterday closed down Grand Central. That probably won't be on CNN today. Mike, to me, this is one of those things where, regardless of whether I like Eric Adams or not, and I always describe him as a not completely insane Democrat, it's just going to get worse. No matter who they replace him with, likely this guy, it's just going to get worse.
Yeah, I mean, you could point to Chicago, right, to make that argument. I think, look, I appreciate some of the things that Eric Adams has been trying to do. I think he's essentially a good person in obviously a very difficult job. I do believe that in a better world we would have a bar set higher. Again, it's not, as we pointed out, it's not the way that the world actually works. But if anyone imagines that, okay, Eric Adams, listens to the demands from some folks that he resign immediately and he resigns, if somebody imagines that somehow that's going to lead to a brand new day in Gotham City, right? And, everything's going to become, good and unicorns will start flying out of our asses. I just don't see how people get to that point, right? There has to be other fundamental changes in terms of what we expect from elected officials, and also how we approach information flow, right? Again, everybody's playing beat the clock. Part of the problem is, look, we always berate the media, which, they deserve a real ass kicking on a regular occasion. But part of the problem is they're playing beat the clock with everybody who's got a smartphone, right, who imagines themselves to be a journalist, right? And they're out there taking photos, or they're putting out their theories, or they're releasing information. So we don't get those moments that we used to get back when you had 3 networks, and everybody had an entire day before the 5 or 11 o'clock news to create their stories, to fact check, right, and then present. And then what you had is, in the evenings, you had a shared experience. Most Americans were sitting down and listening to the same news reports. They may come away with a different interpretation to some degree, but there was a shared experience, and we don't get that anymore. I'm not quite sure how I disappeared down that rabbit hole, but
well, Tom, I know you like to steel man people's positions. If New York City was to get this Jumaane Williams as mayor, look, this is a guy that was for masks, that was clearly for the rioting, was basically saying to people, get out there and do what you want. I mean, that's in essence what he was saying. I suspect that even with best intentions, if you give him the greatest intentions in the history of the world, this just doesn't work for New York City after.
Yeah, my thing with any candidate would be, you want them to lay out what their worldview is predicated on. And so if somebody says, hey, we have this sweeping pandemic, you need to be locked in your house, but it's okay if you have a just cause, you can go completely break the rules. Then I'm like, hold on, time out. Who gets to judge what a just cause is? And so things like that, now you can begin to stack things up. I'm not just going to take anybody's word for it. This guy has told me himself what he stands for and how he makes decisions, which is, again, even though I know that it's delusional and most people won't do it, that is the role I want to play in terms of being a public figure, is getting those who are willing to really look at that. Because once you understand the deeply held convictions, not the thing that is politically expedient, your deeply held conviction that you can talk about off the cuff, you don't need pre-prepared notes, you can go into an antagonistic relationship with somebody and you can say, these are the things I believe, and I can defend them. Now you know who you're voting for. And I think until we do that, we are going to be stuck in the WWE of it all, where I'm getting I tried to avoid using kayfabe, but you get a theatrical performance. And as far as I can tell, politics uses kayfabe way more than the WWE. And so if people understand kayfabe as a political phenomenon, this is how politicians act. They say what is politically expedient. They know that people are emotionally available for, dare I say, manipulation. And so they'll lean into it. So anyway, I want to understand what are the things that people build their worldview on. If this guy has something upon which he builds his worldview that's amazing, and actually there's evidence that it will lead to something great, awesome. And New York will be better for it. But boy, oh boy, it is a complicated problem. And if you have the wrong underlying principles, you are doomed.
Yeah, I think we probably got the answer about this guy. All right, we got one more ad from my friends at Armra, and then we'll talk about a certain orange man before we head out. You've all heard about Armra colostrum by now. It's the best kept secret of industry insiders for a while, but word is finally getting out, and for good reason. Armra colostrum is everywhere these days, and when I first heard about it, I thought it was almost too good to be true. Thousands and thousands of people reporting absolutely transformational health benefits, tens of thousands of 5-star reviews, and life-changing stories. Well, I can confirm this stuff delivers. Armra optimizes your whole body microbiome and strengthens your immune barriers along the mouth, sinuses, lungs, gut, urinary, and reproductive tract to guard against unwelcome particles for your strongest immune health. You can get a hold of this amazing stuff right now. We've worked out a special offer for my viewers. Receive 15% off your first order. Go to tryarmra.com/Rubin or enter Rubin to get 15% off your first order. That's TRYARMRA.com/Rubin. All right, so one more topic for today's show, which is that there does suddenly seem to maybe be some bipartisanship about making sure that our presidential candidates are not assassinated. Check this out from Trump, who is back on Twitter or X. He wrote, "Big threats on my life by Iran. The entire U.S. military is watching and waiting. Moves were already made by Iran that didn't work out, but they will try again. Not a good situation for anyone. I am surrounded by more men, guns, and weapons than I ever have been before. Thank you to Congress for unanimously approving far more money to Secret Service. 0 no votes, strictly bipartisan. Nice to see Republicans and Democrats get together on something. An attack on the former president is a death wish for the attacker, ! All right, Mike, I guess that gets to your point of Trump. He's always going to talk in a certain way and tweet in a certain way. I think probably this is good, that finally the guy's going to get more Secret Service, and now we know that finally RFK is getting Secret Service protection, even though Biden denied it, I think 3 times when he was actually running.
Yeah, it's shocking that RFK wouldn't have had a protective detail at the outset, and it's also shocking that the Secret Service would base their security package on a title, right? Okay, this is a former president. He gets the former president security package, right? Here's the sitting president. He gets this. You don't base it on title. You base it on constant risk and threat assessments of the moment, right? So you evaluate all the intelligence, all the information you're getting from a wide variety of sources. That's your risk and threat assessment. That's what you base your package on, not a title. So it's very good news. It's bizarre that it did take 2 assassination attempts of a former president for Democrats and Republicans to find something that they could work on. We've talked about this a great deal on the President's Daily Brief, available on our YouTube channel at President's Daily Brief.
Well done.
And I say that only because I know my producers will berate me ceaselessly if I hadn't mentioned our YouTube channel. But it's, the idea that you would ignore, not ignore, but you would know that there were threats out there, right? You've had consistent threats against President Trump, against Mike Pompeo, Brian Hook, John Bolton from the Iranian side, right? We have an Iranian regime that has been fairly, not open, but fairly known in terms of their intent. And yet they still moved along as if he was just some protectee, right? It made no sense. And I think the Secret Service has learned a great deal from the ass kicking that they've received over the past couple of months. And that's a very good thing. I know a lot of the agents, and they're extremely good. They're very good. We saw that when they covered down the president immediately in Butler, Pennsylvania, right? That's the sort of action we expect from the Secret Service. The planning, the command and control, the communications, all of that was a complete goat rope. And everybody who, even those without security experience, saw it in real time during that event on the 13th of July, right? But I do believe the Secret Service has learned lessons. They've understood the importance of change. I do think what they need to do is separate the investigation side, put that somewhere else, and just focus as an organization on the protective aspects, ensure by Congress, ensure they've got enough resources, and then just get it done.
Tom, I want to give you the last word today. We'll throw to a clip. This is, I guess it's Kamala's Commerce Secretary. It's not really Biden's Commerce Secretary anymore, Gina Raimondo. And listen, we've talked a lot about rhetoric this week and who has to tone down rhetoric and things of that nature. We'll listen to this.
What he says is the opposite. It's just another lie. Like, how did we get here? Let's extinguish him for good. We have an answer. We have a remarkably talented candidate who is sincere, who's pragmatic, who's open. Let's just get it done.
Tom, with kayfabe in mind, I mean, to me, it's all scripted. She didn't just think of let's extinguish him right before she made that TV appearance. It's sort of like Biden on The View this week and then squashing the bug, as Whoopi described Donald Trump as a bug. That this is all built in. So the idea, it would be nice if we could rein some of this stuff in, but nobody seems to be doing it.
Yeah, so you probably should have fed this one to Mike to get a cynical take. I think it'll be a lot more fun for the viewers. So I have a particular, like, it just winds me up when people airlift a single word that somebody says and make a big deal out of it. Like, for instance, it's going to be a bloodbath. I've watched the interview. It's so clear what he's talking about, and yet people zoom in on this word. All right. Was she fed the word extinguish as a way to subliminally communicate to people that we need to actively eliminate the threat, Donald Trump? I don't know. This one falls into a camp of could be benign. There's so many where it's just brazen, and like when you are likening him to Hitler, that's where I want to flip a table over, because I'm like, guys, it has been a part of the cultural zeitgeist for 50 years that if you had a time machine, what would you do with it? You would go back and kill baby Hitler. I mean, that's like the answer. And so that was so steeped into the subconscious of our culture that when they started doing that, I was like, yo, this is reckless. But extinguish, whatever, just probably being the naive one to Mike's cynical.
All right, then, Mike. All right, then. I'm sorry, Tom. I'm sorry. I'm going to have to give Mike the last word because, yes, I am going full cynical on this one. I think it is fully planned. They do this constantly. I am over the good intentions part. So, Mike, congratulations. You get the last word.
Oh, that's outstanding. Yeah, look, they send the memos around with their talking points. These are all smart people, right? She's very bright. They know what they're saying, right? They know what the power of words are, and they choose to do this, right? They choose, this is the narrative. They can't get away from it because they're so close to the finish line in the election in November. So yeah, the idea that somehow it just slipped out or that it doesn't mean anything, it means a lot to people out there who are within that base. Look, it speaks to people who don't process words sort of the same way that maybe you would imagine, regular folks would. Like, okay, that's hyperbolic, or that's way too partisan, or man, that's inflammatory. They don't. There's a tiny population out there like Ryan Routh and Crooks and the folks that can't process it properly, and they almost see it as a call to action. So it's incumbent upon both sides to stop it. Right? I'm not asking for incredible amounts of civility. I'm just asking for you to be intelligent and understand the world that you live in and choose your words just a little bit more carefully. Right? That's all. That's all I got.
Mike, I was kind of hoping your computer was going to die in the middle of that right as you were about to go on an unhinged rant. Instead, it was kind of a pleasant ending. Guys, it's been a pleasure as always. You're welcome back anytime. And for everybody else, we've got a post-game show coming up on Locals in about 30 seconds. RubinReport.locals.com. Goodbye.
When you look at the totality of the year, if you had to describe it, and it's tough to do, in one word, what would that word be, and tell me why?
New York. This is a place where every day you wake up, you could experience everything from a plane crashing into our trade center to a person who's celebrating a new business that's open. This is a very, very complicated city, and that's why it's the greatest city on the globe.